Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarabhaktaya Namo Namaha Yam Pravajantamana Petyam Petkrityam Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tammayatayo Tarabopinidustam Sarvabhutam Hridimanatoshmi Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Shiptascha Karmadi Tarangamadye Kripamai Tvam Sharanam Prapana Vrinde Namaste Charanarabindam Bhajami Radham Aravinda Netram Smarami Radham Madhurashmitasyam Vadami Radham Karuna Bharadram Tato Nasti Katina Kapi Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. And first of all, offering millions and millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Astaltara Sarashishimad Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And the same again, millions and millions of times unto the lotus feet of our most beloved, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Astaltara Sarashishimad Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shila Prabhupada. And all our illustrious Rupanuga Guru Bhagya and all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavi devotees of the Lord, my Dandavat pranams to all of you. So before we begin our Jaiva Dharma, today is another special tithi. It's the Tirubhav of Bhakti Kamal Govinda Maharaj. Bhakti Kamal Govinda Maharaj was with us just a few short years ago, but he expired. He got very sick, and it seemed that no one was really taking care of him. He was a disciple of Srila Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj, but he had taken shiksha from Bhakti Jivan Janardhan Maharaj, who is an extremely rasik personality. And because of that shiksha, he was able to be very enthusiastic about rasik topics. And he did, I think, just one visit to the Western world. He began to meet many devotees there, but he came back to India, and then he was gifted a place. It was kind of like falling down a bit. It wasn't very well made or anything, but it was opposite where Gokulananda temple is, just straight opposite there. There was a few sort of rooms together and one large room, and somehow they acquired residence there to build a mutt. And he was slowly collecting some funds to begin building a mutt. And then I can remember visiting him many times, and he would be very sick. He would be in his bed with a blanket on, like at 10 o'clock in the morning, and no one would be there helping him. And then he had some followers, but then one day we just heard he'd left his body, just very suddenly. But he was a very sweet personality, quiet spoken, and he would speak these topics of Ras Katha very beautifully. But we understood that he got his mantras, so to speak, from Bhakti Jiva Janardhan Maharaj, because always to get inspired into Rasa Tattva, there has to be someone who is inspiring you on that path. So it was from that Bhakti Jiva Janardhan Maharaj that he got that gift to become totally absorbed. And he would speak so beautifully for hours and hours. Very sweet, delicate personality. But he left early. So today we're remembering him, and with great pleasure and happiness for the brief time that he interacted, because he could speak English very well. So many English people would come to listen to his classes, but he was only speaking for about 12, 18 months altogether, and then he left his body. So Krishna has his plan. So we're very sorry that he'd have to leave early, but today we can remember him on his disappearance day. Shri Kamala Govinda Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Go Premanandi.
Hari Hari Bol.
So now we come to our Falshruti, and where are we up to?
First verse.
We're back to the first verse again. As I said before, we read this every time. When our Bengali children come, the Gurukul, they know all these verses and they just sing it direct all together. And it's very ecstatic. When they come, they can do it. But also they're all reading the script in Bengali. And it's very interesting to see what's being left out. Actually, mostly its additions have been put in the English to explain the translations, etc. The Bengali version is much smaller, actually. Interesting. Falshruti. Prithiviti yatakata dharma name chale, bhagavata kahe shava paripurna chale. As indicated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1:1-2, that's Dharma Projita Kaitavatra Parama Nirmat Sharanam Shatam. This is the second verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's saying exactly the same thing. So in other words, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is not saying anything outside of the line that Srimad Bhagavatam has indicated. All the philosophies on earth thus are celebrated as Dharma are utterly deceptive. So this is a very strong, purifying statement right at the very beginning. Chala dharma chadikara satya dharma mati chaturvargya tyaji dara nitya prema gati. One should completely abandon such deceptive dharmas and absorb his mind in true dharma. In other words, one should give up the fourfold goals of material life, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, and aspire solely for the ultimate destination of nitya prem. So as we've discussed many times, principally like Vedavyas when he was doing his Srimad Bhagavatam initially, it was all dharma, artha, kama, moksha. It was all karma kand and gyan kand. This is actually what he had been writing until the time when he met Narad in the 4th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto. And then Narad, he gives him a benediction in the 7th chapter, where he has a vision of Vrindavan. And the distinction between Vrindavan and anywhere else is enormous. We think that Dwarka is an incredibly holy place. We think Puri is a very holy place. All these places are very pure and holy, but the huge leap that goes to manifest Vrindavan Dham, this is so extraordinary, where Krishna doesn't know he's God. He can't do anything without the mercy of the Brijvasis. Whereas in Dwarka, everyone thinks he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everyone thinks he's Paramatma, Super Soul. They're all honoring him as God. But in Vrindavan, Mother Yashoda even pulls his ears. You know, Nanda Baba sometimes will have to reprimand him. Very little, but Mother Yashoda has to. Krishna is very afraid of Mother Yashoda. When Balaram was coming to help Krishna untie himself from the mortar, Balaram said, "Oh, who tied you? I will really fight him." And then Krishna said, "Mai." Balaram said, "Oh," but he didn't touch the knot. He left it. They were both afraid of Mother Yashoda, because a mother has to instill some discipline in the child, otherwise the child is like an animal. Really. So Mother Yashoda is being like an absolute mother in the most purest Vatsalya bhav conceivable. And also Sachimata with Mahaprabhu. But Sachimata was very gentle. Mahaprabhu did so many naughty things. Mother Sachi, she tolerated. Extreme circumstances were there to show the greatness of her Vatsalya prem. Even Mahaprabhu would get angry and smash everything in the house, but still Sachimata would stay calm and try to give anything to Nimai. So very beautiful experience of Vatsalya bhava, Vatsalya prem. But that was missing previously to Mahaprabhu, because when Krishna was on the planet, nobody really understood about these things, because who was teaching these things? Everyone was just covered with the mood of Aishwarya. It was only the Brijvasis themselves experiencing this Braja Prem, this Madhurya Dhan. But everyone else was all covered by this Aishwarya at the most. But it was only Mahaprabhu who explained what was going on in Vrindavan. Krishna comes once in the day of Lord Brahma to demonstrate this Leela Purushottam. He's showing his Leela. But no one can understand his Leela till Mahaprabhu manifests. Mahaprabhu is praying Purushottam. He's giving all praying. So he's demonstrating the Leela of Vrindavan. But prior to Mahaprabhu, no one understood what Krishna's Leelas were in Vrindavan. Maybe one or two Siddha Purushas like that, but practically nobody. So this Dharma, Artha, Karma, Moksha, this had like weight, so to speak. It had an effect because people were so conditioned by the material energy. They just wanted liberation from it. They didn't know there was another link in the chain beyond liberation. That's what we've already discussed, especially in the 12th chapter. So these truths should be understood. Amitva vimam sad brahme nija jade buddhi nirvishesha brahma gyan nahi chito sudhi. Those who are deluded identify themselves with matter. That is their error. However, one cannot be purified by such delusion by endeavors for nirvishesh Brahm. Just because nirvishesh Brahm is beyond the material purview, it's still limited in the sense that there's no connection with Krishna in the nirvishesh Brahm. We described this extensively when we went through the qualities. And we can remember our shadow. How can there be qualities there? So there's no qualities in the Brahmajyoti. There's the qualities of vairagya and knowledge, but they're not personal qualities. So it's an impersonal zone because there's no connection with Krishna in that zone. So even if you become fearful and want to go to that place of moksha, which most people want to go still today, if you haven't connected with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then that will be your spontaneous desire to become liberated from the material world. We have to pray that the people hear about Mahaprabhu. This is why we do Harinam Sankirtan everywhere around the world. This is why we distribute books. This is the purpose, to put people in touch with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Once a person gets sort of connected even a little bit with Mahaprabhu, then the whole mood of Madhurya can start to infiltrate his consciousness. And after some years, then it can purify his mind completely of these desires of Dharma, Artha, Karma, Moksha. But other than that, we can't go out. Ibichitrata hina hale nirvishesh hoy, kala samutulya seha aprakrita noy. The Mayavad thinks Sri Krishna to be subject to the limitations of time, such as birth and death, and considers that he is not transcendental. That's the nature of the person who doesn't know about Krishna. If you don't know about God and Krishna, then you have to be trying to exploit Maya. Therefore, you're a Mayavad. Thus, he rejects Sri Bhagavan's Vichitrata, astonishing characteristics, paraphernalia, qualities, and Leela. Through this vicious attempt, he is left with the philosophy of Nirvishesh Brahm. This is the biggest error, it seems, that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is immediately focusing on, spotlighting. Desiring for moksha, desiring for Nirvishesh Brahm. Because if you're not desiring for bhakti, that's what you will be desiring for. So most are doing that. So this book, Jaiva Dharma, is to bring us to the path of Shuddha Bhakti. Well, first of all, bhakti, then Shuddha Bhakti, then Bhakti Ras. All three stages, gradations. Kanda Gyan Hoye Dharma Ache Sunishchaya, Prakritita Hoyle Kabu Aprakrita Naya. Such base and contemptible Gyan, which arises out of an attempt to dismember the divine form of Bhagavan, is only fit to be rejected. Why dismember? Because it actually cuts Bhagavan. To deny him qualities, to deny his beautiful form, his beautiful face, his beautiful body, etc., is like dismembering him, saying that the supreme truth is just like zero. If I start talking, oh, Divya Radhadashi, she's like zero, I'm like dismembering your body. I'm like cutting the beautiful form of your body, your qualities, your attributes to pieces. I'm not giving any credence to it. I'm putting more in front, this voidistic, this nirvisheshvaram. This is how the Mayavadas deal. It is prakrita, materialistic, and should never be given credence as aprakat dham. Yes, we should know the distinction between what is spirit and what is matter. This is what I've described many, many times. This is the first lesson in spiritual life. Maybe you can't follow it, but you should know it. You should know in your mind when you're completely materially engrossed. At least you should know that and blow the whistle. Hey, what are you doing? Maybe you can come out of it, maybe you can't. But at least you know it. You're not in ignorance. You're not in base ignorance. You can't enjoy a video anymore. You can't enjoy, because all the time you're watching it, you know that it's not actually conducive for bhakti. You may be trying to do that, but you can't actually do it. So we shouldn't be in ignorance on these topics. What is spirit and what is matter? And when it comes to speaking to a new person, like if you're speaking to your mother or father and they don't understand these topics, you begin the path by discussing what is matter and what is spirit. That's the first. You should instruct your son, Chaitanya, clearly. What is matter, what is spirit? It's matter to do jujitsu. It's fun and it's energetic and it's good for the body, but it's materialistic. Has nothing to do with the spirit soul.
Yes.
Actually puts you more and more on the bodily platform.
Yes.
And then carry on doing it, but know that distinction.
Yes.
It's not that you put a prohibition to it. You just educate someone about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not taking the role of mother seriously. You're indulging. There's a chapter in Bhagavatam, and it's describing this, that if a father or a guru or an elder brother or someone doesn't properly deliver the truth that he understands about spiritual life, then he's a complete hypocrite. He's denying the truth. So now on page 282, we have the incredible verse that we're going through each day to impregnate us with the Dashamula, the Praman 1 and the 9 Prameyas. So I'll just go through it again. Anaya Praha, that Anaya is the Vedas, the Smriti, etc., Upanishads and so on. This is where we're basing our conclusion, our evidence on. And then Tattvam Harim Iha Paramam. Krishna is the Supreme Param, Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the first Prameya. Second Prameya, Sarva Shaktim, is the embodiment of all Shakti, is manifesting from Krishna. Shakti Shaktiman. And then Rasabdim, is the embodiment, Akila Rasamrita Sindhu, is the ocean of rasa. So these three aspects are all about Krishna, which have to be studied and understood. How is Krishna the Supreme Personality of God? How does Shakti Tattva work? And how does Rasa Tattva work? These three aspects are all about Krishna. Now there's going to be three aspects about the Jiva. So Tattva Sams. This is Jiva Tattva verse that we have described. The Jiva is a separated part of Krishna. He's not coming directly from his body, from his form. What are the names of the personalities who come from his forms? Come from his forms.
Swansha.
Anyway, we go on. I'm thinking I'm repeating myself all the time, but it's good, I have to, because we want to come into it. Swamps. And then what do we call it? Krishna is an Amsi. We are called Let's say it again. Those coming from the Amsi, what are they called?
Swamsha.
Say it with confidence. Like pretend that you know it.
Yeah.
Pretend for a minute that you actually know that those coming from the Amsi are called
Swamsha.
So never forget it. Swa means own. Swamsa. And those coming from the Swamsa are called
Vibhinamsa.
I'll ask you tomorrow. See if you can remember.
Now we will know.
One day, but you'll be escaping on the plane. So and bring you up and ask you. It indicates that you've understood it and know it if you can say it. But if you have to think and roll through all the different other ideas in the mind, it means you haven't really captured it.
Yeah.
It's still like you don't really believe in it because you haven't taken it seriously to actually embed it in the heart. It's our decision to take things seriously or not, you know? No one else is going to do it for us. When we decide, because we have independence, to take something seriously, then we can do it. But if we don't decide to take it seriously, we'll never take it seriously. There's no miracle in that.
Yeah.
So, Vivenansans. Who are Vivenansans? Separate.
Simple answer is we.
Means separate.
Yes, separate. Vibhin. Yes.
Swa means connected.
Own.
Like
Swayam.
Chajivan, Prakriti, Kavalitam. I love this word Kavalitam because it means swallowed up. So these are the jivas that are swallowed up by Maya, completely under the illusion of Maya, like most of the people in the world, like us, like you. Tad Vimuktams Chavave. Who are they? Tad Vimuktams Chavave. Who are they?
Liberated soul.
Liberated souls. Thank you. What is it? Wow. I wonder why that's happened. Twice in a row. Whoever's been kind enough to make the phone call to tell me that you can't hear me, Gokul, you please do every single day. But do at the very beginning. Soon. Really? There must be some defect with the charging system. What a shame. Beda abed prakasham sakalam api hare. This achintya beda beda tattva is incredible to consider. That we are non-different to Krishna in quality, but not quantity. This is amazing tattva. We'll discuss it in the 18th chapter. Sadhanam Shuddha Bhakti. Yes, the sadhan is Shuddha Bhakti. How to perform Shuddha Bhakti. Try to remember these. That's why we're going every day. Sadyam Tat Piritim. What does that mean?
Krishna Priti.
Krishna Priti is the sadhya. That's the goal. And then Evati Upadashiti Upadishati Janan Gaura Chandra Swayam Saha. That this is the condensed instructions or the opinion of Sachinandan Gaurahari. So I hope everyone's making some progress to learning. What is it? Not happening?
Yes, no.
Okay. So we discussed the different Shastras yesterday. Yesterday we discussed Paramatma feature, right? Remember?
Yes.
We went into Paramatma. And we're on page 297 at the bottom, the last thing we read. I'll read this translation one more time. This was the last thing we said. What was that you said just now?
Satchidananda.
Satchidananda, yes. Sri Krishna is the all-pervasive, non-dual Parabrahm who controls everything. He is the only worshipable object for all the devatas, for mankind, and for all other life forms. Interesting, he's not the worshipable object for the demons. The demons worship wealth. The demons worship material pleasure, material opulence. And my Gurudev was saying the other day, it came on a thread, that 99.999% are all demons in the world because they all want something from this world rather than want to give something to Krishna. So practically everyone is wanting to take something. Make sure that we are not amongst those 99.999. That we don't want to take anything from this material. Nothing is us anyway. Our children are not our own anyway. They're very temporary creations and they will also die. So we also have to think about that. Although he is one, through his Achintya Shakti, he manifests many forms and performs many varieties of leelas. So this was in relationship to Paramatma. He was asked that beautiful question about Paramatma. So this is in relationship to Paramatma. Rajanath, but how can Sri Krishna be all-pervading if he has a medium-sized human form? He comes in a medium-sized human form. If we accept that he has form, it means he can only stay in one place at a time. And that gives rise to so many philosophical discrepancies. The first is that he cannot be the all-pervading tattva if he has a form and body. Secondly, if he has a body, he will be limited by the material modes of nature. So how can he be independent and have limitless and absolute authority? How can this be reconciled? Good question. Because we understand, he's understanding now that Krishna has a form. So this is also like the Muslims spoke about. In chapter 11, they were speaking about if you give Krishna the understanding of having a form, then you limit him to that form. You think that just that form consists of Krishna. Like Jagannath, you think he's only Jagannath? He only lives in Jagannath Puri? He only lives in the temple? He's not the Lord of the universe? He's not everywhere? So when you understand a personality like that, unless you understand the complete tattva, you'll be thinking that it's limited by time and space. But that's his lack of Krishna consciousness. My dear son, you are now thinking like this because you are bound by the qualities of Maya. What are the qualities of Maya? Time and space. Those are the qualities of Maya. She binds you to considering you are this material body. But understand how strong that binding is. Even we talk about it every single day, read about it, think about it, meditate on it, still we don't believe it. Just like death, we still don't believe. Why? Because we're foolish.
It's kind of ingrained in our being.
It's like a, what do you call, it helps with our insecurity. If we believed in that, we would materially be completely insecure if we hadn't fully depended on Krishna. But it's only by Krishna's mercy that we can understand this. So there comes, there's a sort of like a point where it has to cut. And then we let go of all that's material because our faith will give us the next step, the embrace of Krishna. We know his reality. So what does it matter what happens here? It's more important that I embrace Krishna. This is the higher state of consciousness. My dear son, you are now thinking like this because you are bound by the qualities of Maya. As long as the intelligence remains bound by material qualities, it cannot touch Shuddha Sattva, pure existence. If such conditioned intelligence attempts to exceed its own limitations, trying to understand Shuddha Tattva, it superimposes Mayic forms and qualities on Shuddha Sattva. If we're trying to imagine something, then it's going to create a, there's going to become a covering. It's called superimposing. You're putting something on top of the truth. You're trying to make it relate to our experience. Again, it's like the frog in the well. When he's described the ocean, he says, is it 10 times bigger than my well? Is it 50 times bigger than my well? Is it 100 times bigger than? He can't conceive of the immensity of the ocean because he's comparing everything to his well. Similarly, we can't conceive of transcendence if we haven't been touched by the mercy of a transcendental personality to understand the reality of transcendence. We have to be touched by that person, that atmosphere, that mood has to come. A book can't do it. A book can inspire us to take shelter of sadhu sangha, but the book by itself can't do it. If you just read the book without an explanation on it, you can get something from it, of course, but you can't actually get revelation from it without being in the company of devotees. And thus conceives of material form. I'll read that again. Let me read the whole thing again. If such conditioned intelligence attempts to exceed its own limitations, trying to understand Shuddha Sattva, it superimposes Mayic forms and qualities on Shuddha Sattva, and thus conceives of a material form of transcendence. Then we think it's just material.
It's like a covering.
Yes, and I'm using my covered consciousness to try and understand a covered, and I'm covering the object of transcendence with my covered consciousness. I can't understand it. I have to have the ingredient, that Krishna Seva Vasana, that Bhakti Lata Bij has to come from Guru. It has to. This is why the Ritvik process can't work, because it has to come directly, and it can't come from mystically from some outside source. It has to come directly, looking in the eyes of the sadhak. It has to be gifted. The sadhak, something in the consciousness will wake up when they're sitting in the company of the sadhus and they realize, oh, what they're saying is true, and they're seeing it embodied on the sadhu. They're seeing the reality of it. After some time, the intellect rejects that form of being temporary, mutable, and subject to the material modes, and then it imagines the Nirvishesh Brahm. He runs away, back to moksha. It's like an escape, running away. I go back to moksha, because I can't get that, so again, I'll just try and get the impersonal tendency. Did you put her microphone back in the machine? That is why one cannot gain an understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth through the intelligence. That's a very important paragraph. Very important paragraph. You should mark it and read it a number of times, because I haven't explained it completely. Whatever limitations you are inferring about the transcendental medium-sized form are completely unfounded. Formlessness, immutability, and inactivity simply comprise the material conception of what is opposite to our conception of material qualities. We're using our material intelligence to try and understand transcendence. It's like neti. Well, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. When we're trying to use logic and rationale to understand the reality, the truth, we're trying to understand something of the fourth dimension. It's not in the two-dimensional, the three-dimensional. It's not in this purview. We have to go beyond it. And the holy name can take us beyond it. But the holy name, if it's given by Sadguru, then it can carry us through. But if the holy name is not empowered by Guru and our Guru Vargya, what can it produce really? Formlessness, immutability, and inactivity simply comprise the material conception of what is opposite to our conception of material qualities. So they are themselves a type of material quality. They're still material qualities because it's the opposite of material quality. However, Sri Krishna also has qualities that are of an altogether different nature. This is the point. For example, his beautiful, blossoming, smiling face, his lotus eyes, his beautiful lotus feet, which bestow fearlessness and peace upon his bhaktas, and his spiritual form, which is the pure embodiment of transcendence, with limbs and body just suitable for varieties of playful sports. The medium-sized Sri Vigraha, that is the very basis of these two types of qualities, form and all-pervasiveness, is simply pleasing, is supremely pleasing. The Narada Pancharatra describes his extreme attractiveness to the mind, and this description is replete with all Siddhanta.
निर्दोष गुण विग्रह आत्मा तंत्रो निश्चेत तनात्मका शरीर गुणेश्च हीना आनंद मात्रा करपाद मुखोदरधि सर्वत्र च स्वागता भेदा विवर्जितात्मा.
Sri Krishna's transcendental body is composed of eternity, consciousness, and bliss, without even a scent of material qualities. He is not subject to material time and space. Again, if we have absolute faith in this, how can a jiva fall from that transcendental place that has no material qualities? In the spiritual world, there are no material qualities that we have read about, that we have heard about. So how is it possible for a material quality to arise? It does not arise. It's totally apasidantic to believe that we fell from Vaikuntha. It is not 100% a truth. On the contrary, he exists fully at all places and in all times simultaneously. His form and existence are the embodiment of absolute non-duality, Advaya Gyan Swarup Vastu. His form is so potent, absolute non-duality, Advaya Gyan Swarup Vastu. Direction space is an unlimited entity in the material world. By material estimation, only a formless object can be unlimited or all-pervading. An entity with a medium-sized form cannot. He's saying, like, the entity, if you're imagining this entity is material, then it cannot be limitless. But that form is unlimited. However, this conception only applies in the material world. In the spiritual world, all objects and their intrinsic natures and attributes are unlimited. So Sri Krishna's medium-sized form is also all-pervading. It's been described as medium-sized form. This is all called Krishna Tattva. This is what we're reading about. We're reading about hardcore Krishna Tattva Siddhanta. So it has to be applied with the intelligence to listen to carefully. Medium-sized objects in this material world do not have this quality of all-pervasiveness, but it is charmingly manifest in Sri Krishna's medium-sized Vigraha. That is the supramundane glory of his transcendental Vigraha. Can such glorious attributes be found in the conception of the all-pervading Brahm? Again, he's comparing it to the Nirvishesh Brahm, which is where most people go. If they don't go to Krishna, they go to the Brahmajyoti. They go to Mukti, Moksha. If they're not going to Krishna, that's the alternative. That's what they think is an alternative. But in that place, there is no medium-sized form. Material substances are always limited by time and space. If an entity who is naturally beyond the effects of time is compared to the all-pervading sky, which is limited by time and space, then it is not that entity beyond the influence of time incomparably greater. So if everything is being limited by time and space, then that entity who is not limited by time and space, isn't he much greater? If you're trying to say the medium-sized form is limited, you're saying that because of your consciousness, but in actuality it's not, because it's beyond time and space. It's actually quite simple. It's actually not complex. The language is quite complex, but the actual truth, the Siddhanta, is not complex. Basically, Krishna is beyond.
So why it is said medium-sized objects?
Because we look at the Vigraha and it's a medium-sized object. Krishna in his manifest pastimes was like a medium-sized person. In Dwapara Yuga, the height was much different to now. Krishna was about 15 feet tall. Balaram was about 17 feet tall. But Krishna is considered medium height, 15 feet tall, in his in that yuga, in that time. In his body, he's a medium. He doesn't come as an enormous, all-pervasive, huge mountain-like form. He doesn't represent himself as that. And the Vigraha isn't like, a massive mountain. It's just a very small, even very small. Yes, like Gopal, even very small.
He is in like middle age, in the middle age, Krishna.
And Krishna is in middle. We're seeing Krishna as Navakishore, this youthful age also. That's the point, yeah. Understand? Sri Krishna's Brajadam is none other than the Brahmapur, which is mentioned within the Chandogya Upanishad. This Brajadam is a completely transcendental reality and is comprised of all types of transcendental variety. He's trying to express the distinction between matter and spirit again. Brajana's question came from a not understanding the distinction between matter and spirit. That's where the question came from. So now Babaji is explaining this distinction more fully. Everything in that place, the earth, water, rivers, mountains, trees, creepers, animals, birds, sky, sun, moon, and constellations, is transcendental and is devoid of material flaws or shortcomings. Again, how ludicrous to consider that we fell from a place that is completely transcendental. It just doesn't make sense. Besides the fact no acharyas have said it. So where does that misconception come from? It doesn't come from Prabhupada. He never said that. Conscious pleasure is present always and everywhere in its fullest form. My dear son, that Mayapur Navadvip is that self-same spiritual abode. You are unable to perceive it, however, because you are bound in Maya's snare. But when, by the mercy of saints and sadhus, spiritual consciousness arises in your heart, you will then perceive this land as the spiritual Dham, and then only will you achieve the perfection of Brajavas, residence in Braj. So only when you perceive the truthfulness of these Dhams, like when you perceive the truthfulness of Puri Dham, its transcendental position, then only can you become like a Puri Vasi, someone from this land. And the same in Navadvip. When you perceive it with full spiritual appreciation, only then can you call it your home. Who has told you that there must be material merits and faults? Wherever there is a medium-sized form, you cannot realize the actual glories of the transcendental medium-sized form as long as your intelligence is bound up in material impressions. So that's where his whole question arose from. This material impression of limitation, limiting Krishna because it has a form. And this was exactly the same as the Muslims were saying. They didn't want to allocate a form to Allah because they thought that would limit his all-pervasiveness. But they don't really understand that he has a transcendental form. And that transcendental form is transcendental. It's not material. Therefore, it's not limited by time and space. Rajanath, no intelligent person can have any doubts about this point. However, I would like to know when, where, and how Krishna's spiritual Vigraha, Dham, and Leela are manifested within material limitations, since Sri Radha Krishna's Vigraha and bodily complexion and their Leelas, associates, houses, pastime groves, forest, secondary forests, and all the objects of the spiritual world are transcendental. So he's not sure how can this transcendental realm exist here in the material realm. This is what he's confused about. How can Krishna come into this? Krishna is unlimited. Okay, he accepts that. But how can that unlimited personality come into this world with his Dham? How can this Braja Dham, which Babaji has just said is present when you see the full form of Krishna in his full all-pervasive aspect, how can that be manifesting in this material world? Got the question? It's a good question. Babaji, Sri Krishna possesses all potencies. So even that which appears to be impossible is actually possible for him. Again, this is achintya bhava. This achintya mood has to be there in the devotee's heart to have faith, to accept with faith, to accept that Krishna is inconceivable. Actually living with Lord Jagannath, it's very easy because his achintya bhava is so extraordinary. There are so many thousands of miracles around, stories, pastimes about Lord Jagannath and his devotees and so on. Lord Jagannath is able to do anything at any time, beyond time and space. This achintya bhava is there present. And similarly in Navadvip Dham with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and with Krishna in Vrindavan. What is astonishing in this? He is the all-potent personality, Sarva Shaktimam Purush, the fully independent supreme controller who is completely autocratic and imbued with Leela. This is very wonderful conversation. This is deepening Brajanath's absolute faith in transcendental qualities, in the transcendental world, in what is transcendence. It's not subject to our intelligence. If someone's very bright and very clever, they can't understand these things so well because they keep coming back to their own intelligence and their ability to reconcile. But the transcendental world can't be reconciled materially. It's beyond material. It has to crash through that gate, that boundary of our conditioned consciousness. Try to understand that conditioned consciousness is like a solid 20-foot brick wall. We can't break it, alone. We have to have influence from the sadhu to break it. He is the all-potent personality, Sarva Shaktiman Purush, the fully independent supreme controller, who is completely autocratic. Autocratic means he can do anything he wants, at any time, and imbued with Leela. Today we were talking about Mahaprabhu breaking out of the Gambhira. He can do anything he wants. He's the Supreme Lord. If he wants to get out of the Gambhira and all the doors are locked, he's still able to do that because he's the supreme autocratic personality. Simply by his desire, he can appear in this material world in his self-same spiritual form, along with his spiritual abode. How can there be any doubt about this? So he's trying to clear these very deep doubts in Brajanath about the reality of transcendence, the reality of Krishna's potency, the reality of the Lord himself. He's trying to purify this. Where did I get to? By his desire, this one? Brajanath. By his desire, he can do everything, and he can manifest his purely spiritual form in this material world. That much is clear. However, materialistic people tend to think that Sri Krishna's own transcendental abode that is manifest here is simply a part of this material universe, and they perceive his Braja Leela to be just like ordinary Mayic activities. Why is this? Interesting. Anugrahaya bhaktanam manusyam deha ashritam. Krishna manifests to perform these pastimes to give the conditioned souls some opportunity to appreciate his absolute spiritual sweetness. And then they can have full faith in Krishna. Then they can connect with Krishna in full shraddha, faithfully. Let's see what Babaji says. One of Krishna's unlimited transcendental qualities is his bhakta vatsalya, affection for his bhaktas. Because of this quality, his heart melts, and through his Hadini Shakti, he bestows upon his bhaktas a type of spiritual potency that enables them to have direct darshan of his self-manifest form and his transcendental pastimes. That verse I said, Anugrahaya Bhaktanam, that describes that Krishna has manifest in the human-like form to attract people to this pastime, to his transcendental pastimes. However, the devotee's eyes, ears, and other senses are made up of Maya, so they can see no difference between Bhagavan's spiritual pastimes and the mundane events in human history. Very interesting. So it's because of,
Why a lot of people call these pastimes as mythology, which is wrong.
I know. But actually I heard the other day someone explaining that mythos, where mythology comes from, means fact. And it's become, the word is understood today as being different.
As if it is a story that never existed.
Yes,
That is how we
almost like in
understand it.
English we say like fairy tales.
Yeah.
But that's not really the meaning of mythology. Mythology means, in fact, those facts that took place. But people have changed the meaning. It's a strange thing. I'll send you the Greek for it.
But still learning is like a history. Yeah.
Huh?
Still learning that it is like history.
Yes,
Yeah.
history. Yeah, and it's just can be changed or is not the truth. Yes, it's true. Rajana, then does this mean that Bhagavan Sri Krishna did not descend to bestow mercy upon all jivas? Babaji. Bhagavan certainly descends to benefit the whole world. Let me just read you this verse because it's very beautiful. That's on my mind. Anugrahaya bhaktanam manusyam deha ashrita vajate tad rishi kritya yashrutva tatparo varvat. And this means, in order to bestow mercy upon the devotees, Bhagavan Sri Krishna manifests his human-like form and performs such extraordinary pastimes that anyone who hears about them must become exclusively devoted to him. You see this at the top of the page. Write it down. Take it into your heart. Yes, in the verse book. One must become. The word at the end of this is bhavet. It's described as the imperative. One must become attracted to Krishna once one perceives these incredibly extraordinary pastimes. But with faith, one must see these pastimes. Bhagavan certainly descends to benefit the whole world. The bhaktas see his descent and leela as transcendental, whereas the non-devotees perceive them as ordinary human affairs, which take place under the influence of material principles. Even so, these leelas have the power to bestow a type of spiritual merit, sukriti, and as this sukriti gradually accumulates, one is nourished so that one develops one-pointed shraddha towards Krishna bhakti. This is the whole conception of this, is to develop this one-pointed shraddha. That is why Bhagavan's descent certainly benefits all the jivas in the universe, because jivas who possess such shraddha and perform ananya bhakti sadhan, unalloyed devotional service, will one day be able to see Bhagavan's transcendental form and leela. So by hearing about these topics, even if you don't have complete faith, but ultimately by practicing the sadhan of chanting, of performing Krishna seva, puja in the altar room, cooking, etc., all these different sevas, then the heart will become purified. And then we will realize these transcendental truths. We want this pratyakshabagamam dharmyam. There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita in the 9th chapter, number 2. Raja vidya rajaguyam papitram itimutam pratyakshabagamam dharmyam. That by direct perception, these truths can be perceived. Krishna is saying, with this Raja Vidya, this king of knowledge, Raja Vidya Rajaguram, this most secret of knowledge, this knowledge of transcendence. Why is Krishna Leela not distinctly described throughout the Vedas? Babaji, the pastimes of Sri Krishna are described here and there in the Vedas, but in some places they are described directly and other places indirectly. Can you turn that panel? The middle one, this one. Thank you. Two types of expressions or tendencies determine the meaning of words in a text. Two types of expressions or tendencies determine the meaning of words in a text. The direct or literal sense, abhida, and the indirect or secondary sense, lakshana. They are also called mukhya vritti and gona vritti, respectively. The literal sense of abhidya vritti of the mantra Shyamak Chabalam Prapadye in the last section of the Chandogya Upanishad describe the eternality of rasa, and the service attitude of the liberated jivas towards Krishna according to their respective rasas. The indirect meaning of the words is called Gonabriti, secondary significance. In the beginning of this conversation between Yajnavalkya, Gargi, and Maitreyi, Krishna's qualities are described by means of indirect presentations, Lakshana Vritti. At the end, the super excellence of Krishna is established by means of direct presentations, Mukhya Vritti. The eternal pastimes, Nitya Lila of Bhagavan, are sometimes indicated in the Vedas by the direct expressions of the words, and in many places, the indirect approach describes the glories of Brahm and Paramatma. In fact, it is the pledge of all the Vedas to describe Krishna's glories. In other words, Krishna's glories are not always described directly. The sadhak, with his purified, independent intelligence and purity, has to appreciate what the text is saying. It's like Radha never says to Krishna, I love you. If Radharani said that to Krishna, Krishna, oh my God, what have I done wrong? He would be trembling. Why is she being so unkind to me, telling me she loves me? You don't say to someone you love them. You demonstrate. You serve them. You make them something. You do something for them. But you don't say, I love you. If you say, I love you, it breaks it completely. That's like all of a sudden you brought it down to a business arrangement. You know, it's completely different. So that's to intimate by doing service. It may not be crystal clear. The individual has to use his appreciation to understand that mood, and then he'll catch something that's almost intangible. He'll catch the loving sentiment of that personality performing the seva. But if the person doing the seva says, yes, I love you, then it's useless. It has no real strength. Okay, I'm just going to read this last question and leave it there, because then tomorrow we're going to discuss the incredible qualities of Krishna. And then that'll come into sort of like another topic. But all of these things we've been discussing is to try and develop our Shraddha for Sri Bhagavan. This is all called Tattva Vichar, Iha Paramam. This is the verse. What is it? That first verse, how is it describing it? Iha. Yes? Amnaya Prahat Tattvam Iha Paramam. This Harim Paramam. This is all describing Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he can't be understood by the material mind. Don't try and smear our understanding of God to cover God himself by putting our material conceptions over the potency of God. You reduce him to being like a medium-sized, to being like an ordinary person. You know, if we're just trying to make him, if we're trying to relate to him as us, like if you relate to Jesus Christ, for example. All right, some people say he's God or like God, but he's in this world and he's doing activities and so on. But he's doing great yogic activities sometimes. Sometimes he walks on water. Sometimes he distributes food in 5 loaves to millions of people. So he can perform these mystic opulences. That's not actually an indication of being God. That's an indication of being a great mystic yogi. This is not meaning God. God doesn't have to do things like that. God is touching the heart of the individual.
Beyond all these things.
Huh? Beyond those things, yes, beyond all material things like that.
So can we say that those mystic things which Jesus Christ is performing, over here it is called as Leela? Or how can we?
No, they're his Leela in that form, but he manifested for Kali Yuga. It's a Kali, like Islam. You don't get either of these religions in any other of the ages, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, that these religions are not there. They're not eternal religions. They're just briefly going to be present during this age of Kali. And but the precepts are very limited. But it's what people can understand, you see, with their own mind. It doesn't go beyond, it doesn't go into transcendence. It's not beyond what is materially possible. It's like a regular person can practice very strongly a yogic path, a siddhi path, and come to walk on water. There are many yogis who can walk on water. It's not a big deal, actually. One follower of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati tells a story about one young man, and he wanted to perfect this mystic siddhi of walking on water, so lots of people would be impressed. Jesus is not like that, but it's this is just a story. And so he did that for 10, 12 years, went to the Himalaya and practiced that. But then Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's disciple, I can't remember his name, I think Gaurava, perhaps, he said, just for 2 paise you can take a boat. Why do you want to walk on the water? What's the big deal? You've taken 10 years of your life to do that. You can just take a boat. There's no need to do that. So try to reconcile these things.
Like also, like here is described that Bhagavan came with his like all the head of Vrindavan, and all these are like transcendental.
Entourage,
so,
yes.
Yeah, so we can connect with his lila and pastime.
Yes.
But in terms of Jesus and the Muslims, they don't have like lila.
No.
They have like some pastime. They like
Yes.
for mankind or something like this. But they did not show anything that someone can connect.
Absolutely.
With this, like,
to make some display.
Yeah. Heart.
Yeah, and just an individual doing something, but without their whole entourage coming. Like without Mother Yashoda and Nanda Baba, how can we understand Vatsalya Prem? Without Subal and Sridham, how can we understand Sakya Prem? Without all the gopis and Radharani, how can we understand Madhurya Prem? So without all the entourage, yes, very good point. Thank you, Gaurav. Okay, tomorrow we'll come back and talk about the qualities. Jaiva Dharma ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Ananta Kota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi, Panchakalpa Dhruvya.